Hi, and welcome to Cannabis Conversations with the Candidates. I'm Neil Smith, along with Indiana NORML Vice Chair Denise Beach and cannabis nurse Shelley McDonald. Our guest this evening is Democratic candidate for District 41, Greg Woods. Hey, you viewers out there in podcast land, feel free to ask questions of the candidate in the chat box. And we're brought to you by Hometown CBD in Plainfield and the Indiana NORML store. And Greg, I'd like to welcome you to our program.
Thank you, Neil. It's an unbelievable joy to be here. You have no idea.
Well, we're very happy to have you. Tell us something about yourself. What's your background? Why do you want to run for office?
Something about myself. I am a born and raised Hoosier. I grew up in Indianapolis on the northwest side of town, Pike High School, go Red Devils. I have been a businessman. I've owned a couple of businesses. I've been married now. It'll be 37 years this July. And we have two sons, both of them adults. One has got kids of his own, lives out in New Ross, Indiana. The other is still here with us. Reason for running? Well, I guess there could be a lot of reasons. I started out, one of the first things I did as a young man is I wanted to be a paramedic. Actually did become an EMT. I did the job for a number of years in the early 80s. And I learned one of the hard truths about the government is that the government can and does deceive people when it plays into their best interest. And what I'm speaking of there is the AIDS epidemic. As somebody who was working in and around blood and bodily fluids, we as medics were not told the truth of what was going on, and what happened was we were not informed at that time that the epidemic could be passed on simply by contact. As most of us remember those days, and were told it was something completely different. So that, plus a lot of other things, started to push me into the direction of trying to get a little bit more involved. And I honestly believe that people need to be more involved, to be honest with you. I think everybody should vote. Everybody should at least know what's going on and should be involved. So what got me involved were two people. Of course, President Obama was an eye-opener for me. And Bernie Sanders. The man is a whirlwind of energy, and he was the one that impressed upon me that it's important to start from the bottom up when you're trying to build a new party and trying to get things moving in the right direction. Nobody should be shooting for senator and governor. Everybody needs school board members and local town councils and things along that line. So I started to look at getting more involved in something like that, and with the help of the Boone County Democrats, with a little bit of a push, they got me to commit 2 years ago to jump into the race. And as we all know, 2 years ago was the beginning of the end of what everybody thought was the end of the world. So that campaign went nowhere since I couldn't go anywhere. And this time around, though, it's different. So this time I'm very excited, very enthusiastic, have a lot of very enthusiastic people. So that's what got me involved, was wanting, not, I hate to sound cliche, but wanting to make a difference, but also wanting to represent everybody and not just a few select individuals or corporations or that kind of thing. I'm in this for everybody. So hopefully that answers the question, sort of, I guess.
Yeah, very, very well. Those are all the reasons that people should run for office. You know, I sure would like to see that out of more people. What about the cannabis issue turned you on? Why are you back in cannabis?
Well, that's kind of an easy one. I've been a hippie from way back, as my boss reminds me of all the time. He has a sign.
What's wrong with that?
Absolutely nothing. Some of my best friends are hippies. So when I was hired for this wonderful company, he had a big sign in his office. Actually, I've seen the picture of the original, and it said, hippies must enter in the back. And I gave him a hard time about it. And he said, as long as I'm working here, that sign stays in his office. And he and I get along great. So don't think he's not giving me a hard time as much as he can. But I have been an advocate for a lot of reasons. I realized at a young age that all the horror stories were obviously false. It didn't lead to me doing heroin. It didn't lead to me becoming some sort of an addict. Ironically, one of the side effects that I realized very young, when I was younger, before I got married, is that this is going to sound crazy, but I didn't have a hangover for almost the first 30 years of my life, and I didn't realize what it was until I quit smoking for a number of years after I got married, and I had to have I didn't have a lot of extra income, and it was something that it shocked me. It really did. So. And what got me re-energized or re-involved in this is when my wife was diagnosed with lupus. She's on a fistful of medication all the time, including a shot she takes once a week, among other things. Embryol.
Yeah. That's for my arthritis.
That's for her rheumatoid arthritis. So, and it's a wonderful medication. It's changed her life, but it's also completely unaffordable for anybody who doesn't have medical insurance.
Mhm.
It's thousands of dollars per injection, and our insurance covers most of it. Yes, that's true. It's such a miracle drug, at least in my mind, that they should probably be working on a pill or something by now and making it more affordable for everybody. But big pharma, we won't go into that right now. So once I realized that this particular industry and this particular plant was going to be something that was going to make a difference in her life, and she was not a smoker when she was younger, so it didn't take long for me to realize that this was something that I felt pretty strongly about, and I was going to make it part of my campaign one way or the other. And thanks to people like yourselves, it made the job a lot easier. So, not to mention the fact that the entire criminal side of it is completely insane. We're way past the point of putting people in jail. They're talking about building a brand new justice center up here in Lebanon, millions of dollars spent for more beds, and I guarantee you that they won't need that many if they stop arresting people for simple possession. I think that that's a big deal. And needs to be remedied as well. So decriminalization and legalization are ideal in my mind, but at a minimum, the medical marijuana situation is just a no-brainer. I just don't see how anybody can argue with that at this stage of where we're at in our history, at least as far as this country is concerned. Excuse me, I have to slide out of camera here for just a second, or my dog is going to tear down a door.
Okay. Yeah, we like dogs and cats around here.
It definitely sounds like Greg has a great story of, why he thinks it's personally great for legalization or decriminalization locally as well as federally. What do you think about federally, Greg?
Well, once again, I think this is another example of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. All the states that have already legalized it should have been a no-brainer, but I think the federal government is so entrenched with that, the drug war, as they like to call it, that they have literally lost the bigger picture. And they don't realize that you can still fight opioids and heroin and the stuff that's killing people, and we can let this one slide. I mean, let's face it, the fact that it's still a Schedule I narcotic is so completely insane to me that should have already been dealt with a long time ago. But once again, the dog with a bone, they won't let it go, and it's a fear factor. We've got a lot of guys that are still too old to appreciate what everybody's trying to tell them from the other side of the aisle and the other side of the age bracket. So I think it's been proven it's not addictive. I think it's been proven that you don't wreck your car from overusage, and you don't have all these other problems. But I don't have an answer. The answer is obvious. The federal government is doing the right thing right now. The state, the House has already passed a proposition which looks to be all-encompassing, and all we need now is for them to push it through the Senate, and let's just do this thing and get it over with. And then let's make it easier for all the legal states to use banks and do business the normal way. I mean, it's just insane.
Absolutely. Do you think they're just too worried about backpedaling? Since we talked off camera about term limits, that kind of thing, some of them have been in so long where they were such advocates for the war on drugs and the reefer madness, and it's a gateway drug. Do you think they don't want to look like they're backpedaling now?
Probably, like I said, it's difficult. One of the hardest things for any one person to do is admit you're wrong. It's painful. Every one of us can feel the pain of it, having to say those words, no matter what the subject matter is. But it's a learning experience. So there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I reviewed the information and it appears that I was wrong. There is nothing now that I can find scientifically. Now we're having to refer to science, of course, scientifically to prove that there's anything wrong with this particular plant, and it is a plant. So and we haven't even gotten into the other factor, which is the hemp factor, which is something I will dig into too. But yes, I think you're right. I think it is nothing more than a bunch of guys who are just afraid to admit they were wrong. And once again, you also have to deal with the fact that corporations are people. So there's a lot of these same guys getting a lot of money from other vendors who don't want it to be legal. I won't name names like tobacco or alcohol, but if that's the case, then it becomes easier for them to say no when they know that they're going to lose money from these people if they think that they're going to bet on a different horse.
Fair enough. Shelley?
Absolutely. One of the things that we try to do with Indiana NORML is to break the stigma of the cannabis users. So how, in your own words, would you describe a cannabis user that you know?
In my own words, how would I describe a cannabis user that I know? I would describe them as a mother. I would describe them as a hardworking individual in a wonderful married relationship, and living a normal life. And that goes for some of the other people I know who also have no qualms and no issues with using the product, whether it's a gummy or whether they're smoking it. They're the people that live next door to you. These are the same people you've grown up with, people you work with, whether they're ingesting it or whether they're using a balm or something that relieves pain. There are just any number of things that can be used. So would I classify them as being different in any way? No. I say that the average cannabis user is just like you and me. There's nothing different about them.
That's an absolute great answer, because I think that's something that people don't realize with all the old propaganda, is that it is your next door neighbor, it is your teacher, it is your hairdresser, it is your nurse, it is your doctor, it is your lawyer. It's not the guy living in the trailer down by the river, that hasn't held a job in 20 years. It's just normal, everyday people.
Yeah.
Thank you. Neil?
Yes, thank you. Greg, why do you think it was made illegal to begin with?
Well, you want the historical perspective? Originally, my first original review of this was that it was I think the term was robber barons of the early 20s and 30s, a name of a specific family on the West Coast that owned an awful lot of timber. And once they realized that hemp could replace that timber 10 times over, they went out of their way to try to make it as illegal as possible. Recently, I read some other information about people actually trying to smoke the hemp itself and adding chemicals to it. Sounds a lot like spice today. And that caused a little bit of a serious problem, a lot of people being sick. And of course, as any good politician wants to make a mountain out of a molehill, rather than just subtract the leaves off of that particular plant and make the actual hemp itself a problem, they made the whole plant illegal. And I think it has everything to do with paper. I think it has everything to do with tobacco. And I think it has everything to do with not being able to control a product that they felt let's put it this way. My understanding is it's not new to the planet. It's not something that just appeared out of the clear blue sky in the last 50 to 100 years. So there is a lot of background on the plant, but not to the qualifications of your average European man who came over here and wanted to build a new nation, and they were trying to form it in a specific way. So The reason is lack of education. I mean, it's just that simple. And it's still today. I think we just covered that. It's simply believing rumors and innuendos and not putting your faith in science and statistics. Instead of taking the facts that we know to be true, they will believe whatever they are told to believe based on somebody who has a wild idea about what cannabis does or doesn't do to a human being.
It's a major factor in keeping cannabis or making hemp illegal was the petroleum industry, because of the fuel potential of hemp would have seriously put a crimp in the particularly Standard Oil and the Rockefellers' plans. Henry Ford, even after the 37 Tax Act, grew hemp up to his Iron Mountain facility there in Michigan, and made a car basically out of hemp in 1941. So it's still, the reasons that, and then they played on white America's racism in the 1930s to convince people that Black people or Mexican people were, they get high on that, disrespect white people, which I'm surprised, that generation fell for that, to be honest. I mean, how, it sounds like a scam on the surface, but, Denise, I think you're up next, aren't you?
Yeah. So how would you describe, because a lot of people say, oh, you're just saying it's medical because you just want a reason to get high. How would you describe the endocannabinoid system to either your constituents or your colleagues at the State House?
So as far as, that's interesting. I keep looking back on the one thing I keep drawing some conclusions to is I happen to be a beer drinker. I like a lot of IPAs. I like a lot of different things. My wife actually enjoys a good bourbon. So nobody looks at those. Oh, she's okay. Yeah, then you have a fan here. That's my son's fault. He's become this bourbon snob, and he's always trying new stuff and bringing it over here. So when you draw the comparison between the average person who spends an average Friday or Saturday drinking a six-pack or having a few drinks of alcohol, and you try to draw some sort of conclusion that that's different than using cannabis, it really isn't. If anything, the cannabis is less harmful. It has less effects on your system and less effects on your mental stability. As I've already said many times, people don't go out, you get drunk, and unfortunately we still have issues with people driving and drinking. So that kind of thing is always going to be a problem. But the more people that find a way to use cannabis as opposed to a lot of other available legal or illegal items could really make a big difference in my mind. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but that's kind of the first thing I think of when people want to try to draw some sort of comparison between one thing and another, and try to make one sound like a horrible monster drug and the other sound like, oh, it's just a cigarette, it's just a beer, it's no big deal.
And I was kind of looking for like our endocannabinoid system that we do have that was discovered, late 80s, that we do need this. Our body makes cannabinoids. So when if like some of us, they're getting a little bit older, our systems deplete, we need to replenish. And we can do that with medical cannabis, with hemp, that kind of thing. If people aren't familiar, especially you're going to be your colleagues down at the State House aren't familiar with the endocannabinoid system, that we do need those cannabinoids to maintain our homeostasis in our body. Would you be comfortable talking to them about that? Or how would you go about bridging that gap with them?
Well, first of all, I have to admit that's interesting. I don't think I've delved that deep into cannabis to even have picked up on that. So thank you very much for that. I guess we're back to, can you teach an old dog new tricks? Are they willing to even listen to fancy scientific terms and look at studies and try to take it seriously as another way to say, can we help? One of the things that your secretary, when he came out to talk to us, he brought up the vet issue specifically, our American vets and how they're suffering. That would probably be a way to tie in what you're talking about. Say, okay, we can help these gentlemen, and among other things, for their pain, but think about what this will do for, to replenish this, this particular item that they need as they get older. I'm sure it can't hurt. I'm sure it's going to be a big help. So in my mind, it's trying to bring something that they're comfortable with into the conversation so that they don't feel like I'm talking over their heads. One of the things that we are accused of, and by we I mean Democrats, is that sometimes people think that we pretend to be smarter than them, and that we're talking in a different language. And I don't like to say that. That's not true. I try to talk just like everybody else. But then when Denise, when you use big words like that, somebody's like, well, I have no idea. I think she just made that up. There's no such word. So you have to back that up and say, well, no, wait a minute. Let me Google that for you. See, look, it's a real word. It's right here on the, oh, okay. Well, it's on the internet. It must be true. So we're good. So.
Right. Well, Greg, we have a great book. I'll be more than happy to get that sent out to you. It's on the whole endocannabinoid system and can kind of help you with like your elevator pitch to people or something, but we'll be more than happy to get that sent out to you.
I like that.
Shelley?
I like your I have a really nice elevator speech, and I'll be happy to add a second one to my repertoire, because that would be something. And I'll if you send it to me, I'll make sure my wife gets to read it too, so she can see what it is. She'll have more time to read it than I do probably. But I'll got a vacation coming up, so I might just take it with me. We got a cabin in Brown County we're going to go to, so in Brown County, so I just take it with me, and maybe that's what I'll read while I'm down there.
Oh, there you go. You'll be absolutely amazed. So do you think Indiana can legalize even if the federal government doesn't?
Ouch. Do I think Indiana should? Yes. Do I think they will? I think it will depend on whether or not we get the right minded people in the right places. And as hard as it is for me to say, I really honestly believe it's going to mean we have to have the right governor, because it starts at the top. Governor Holcomb is done. He can't run again. So like I said, it's going to be interesting in 2 years, but we have to start somewhere. So people like me starting at the legislative branch, then we bring in, we get a few more people in the state house, and we bring up the topic. But I think it's going to take a lot to turn a lot of these folks away from their old mentality that we've already been talking about repeatedly. It seems impossible to believe that we've had 15 bills down there and not a single one of them has gotten out of committee. Not a single one of them was even brought into committee. And it seems insane when you hear that, but it all boils down to what they think are priorities, and they don't think this is a priority, but we need to make it a priority. I think it's as crazy as it sounds, it may actually we may have to beat them over the head with those millions of dollars on the other side of the border. I mean, we just have to, that may be the only thing that drives them in the right direction. If that's what it takes, fine. If all they respond to is money, then money it is. The rest of us will enjoy the pain relief and the other issue and the other things that we get from it. But I think that it's whatever it takes to get this done is what we're going to need to do, and we're going to need to do it quickly.
Greg, are you? I'm sorry.
No,
Greg,
go ahead.
are you aware of the cannabis caravan that the Indiana Democratic Party is doing this week, last week, and this week?
I caught wind of it online, but since I'm a working guy, I have a real job, I was not able to participate. So yeah, I heard about it, but I didn't really follow up on it very much. But I know they were out there beating the bushes and trying to do what they can to get more people to realize that this is one of the things we're trying to do.
Our chairman, Jason Straw, and his wife, Shelley, went on the tour with them around, I think it was 8 cities in Indiana. Excellent response on every stop.
Well, that's great to hear. That's important on all kinds of levels. Just getting out there and talking to people. I think that's what's been missed in a lot of cases, and that's what I'm hearing too. Is that by going out and talking to people, you get that one-on-one contact that I think's been lost a lot.
Yeah, several Well, I live in Beech Grove right now, the little island or in the Sea of Indianapolis. Uh, um, but it's yeah, I have not been. I haven't had anybody political come to my doorstep for forever. You know, this is ridiculous. I mean, how are you supposed to reach out to people? You know,
It's
uh,
it's a tough road to hoe because as Denise and I kind of kidded with earlier, you know, you can get a lot of doors slammed in your face if you're talking to the wrong people.
that happens.
Yeah, and you know, I'm going to be doing a lot of footwork here in the next few months, and I plan to go to a lot of homes, whether they're on a list or not, to try to at least, you know, introduce myself, and my team will introduce who I am when I'm not on the same street or whatever. But you're right. We rely so much on technology and computers to tell us who to talk to and who to not talk to. And I've had a couple of meet and greets. They've gone pretty well, and I'm going to continue doing that. I want to invite people to come find me at all kinds of events. And I think that's important that I'm at the fairs and the festivals and the fish fries and all of the thing that goes along with being, you know, being a candidate. And you have to do that so people can hunt you down, whether they have something good to say to you or not. It all matters to me.
You know, the old style politicians always had the glad hand thing, you know, everywhere. And you know why they did that? It works.
Yeah, it does. And it's funny. I debated on that with the pandemic. The shaking of hands is kind of an outdated kind of thing. And I actually contemplated whether I even wanted to continue doing that, not just do a fist bump with everybody for fear we're still dealing with, you know, some leftover strains and just a common cold or the flu can knock you down for a couple of weeks.
A fancy elbow thing, maybe.
But I've stuck with if somebody sticks their hand out, I'm going to shake it, and I'll leave it at that, just because I think it's up to the individual if they feel it's an obligation, and I don't have a problem with that. Kissing babies, that's a different story. I think I'll leave that up to the mothers.
You get in trouble doing that.
Yeah, I'm not going to be seeking out small children to try to give a kiss to. So no, that's not.
Yeah, that's true. It's been interesting watching, you know, the pragmatic on, you know, rubber meets the road politics and how it's changed, you know, since I was a kid in civics class. We're going to go ahead and pay that bill to keep us online and all that. We'll hear from Hometown CBD in the Indiana Normal Store right now.
Indiana Normal memberships are back. Help us raise nonprofit dollars by becoming a member of Indiana Normal. The money raised will be used to educate the public about cannabis reform in Indiana, only for $25 a year. Visit www.indiananormal.org. Hometown CBD in Plainfield, with a great variety of Delta 8 and CBD edibles, Delta 8 THC cartridges, and CBD oils. Hometown CBD, your source for high-quality CBD products you can trust in the greater Plainfield area.
We're back right now, and if any of our viewers have any questions for Greg Woods, running for Indiana House District 41, just send us in the comments what you'd like us to ask. We'll get to it. Greg, I was wanting to ask you, it sounds a little strange to ask, but bear with me. Describe the difference between alcohol intoxication versus cannabis high, to the best of your knowledge. How's cannabis different than other substances that have been deemed harmful? And do you think that most people in the government don't understand that there's a difference between the two?
I'll answer the last question first. Yes,
Okay.
I believe that the government, that most of the people, at least the ones that want to admit it, don't know the difference between alcohol intoxication or having smoked or ingested some sort of marijuana. The difference, in my mind, is fairly easy if you want to draw a more generic conclusion. Cannabis is more of a relaxing and I prefer to use the term mellow. A mellow feel. It leads to a lot more, in my mind, a lot more conversation, a lot more laughter, a lot more fun. Alcohol, on the other hand, depending on who's drinking it, can cause all kinds of issues. Some people become very angry. Some people become very depressed. Some people become just sloppy and crazy. So I think that from a generic point of view, alcohol affects the brain in many different ways, and sometimes, depending on how much alcohol you drink, it can be hazardous. While on the other side of the coin, the cannabis user or somebody who uses cannabis, the effects are pretty straightforward most of the time, and generally the worst case scenario is you go to sleep, or you're just so relaxed that that's what you want to do. And then, of course, you do have your standard munchies and the need for something sweet or something salty, which I don't have a problem with that for the most case. As you mentioned, Denise mentioned earlier, but as you get up in years, you got to be careful about inhaling a whole bag of Cheetos or something like that, and not thinking about it until you're done and you realize you made a huge error in judgment.
Oh, the reason I asked that question, Greg, we constantly get this pushback about stoned driving, and I think in talking to some of the legislators that are using this as no, we're not going to support it attitude, is they don't understand that when you smoke a joint, you don't stagger down the road and all that, whereas you're going to if you do the alcohol. And I'm thinking that they don't understand the difference, so they are opposed. How do you feel about driving? About what law or regulation would you want to see about stone driving?
Wow, that's one area that obviously I would not be an expert at. I don't know that there's even what other states are even doing. I've not really looked into it. I would be curious to see what regulations they might have or what testing they even have capable of. I would assume that it would be no different than a standard roadside test for anybody who they feel is under the influence to the point where they can't stand up straight, they can't walk a straight line. If somebody's so high that they literally can't function, which I don't think I've ever seen that in my life, or at least not to my recollection, then yeah, we'd have a problem. But for the most part, the two of those are completely opposite. I'll trump you one higher than that. There's an awful lot of legal medications that people take that scare me that they're out driving. So and there's no question that that's perfectly fine. That they can be under the influence of some sort of heavy medication, whether it's a sleeping medication or something to relax them, and nobody bats an eye. So from my perspective, I don't think that there's a whole lot of area there that they need to be too concerned about. I really don't. I don't see that there's going to be a lot a lot of people who are going to be, driving around like Cornelly Jones or AJ Foyt and trying to run into people or whatever their fear is. It's just there's just nothing there to be afraid of. And I'm sure if we looked at Colorado or some of the other states that have been doing this a while, they'd have enough statistics to back that up. So I just, once again, we're back to science. We're back to just saying, here's the evidence. As you can clearly see, there's no cause for alarm.
That's true. Also considering how many people currently in Indiana smoke cannabis and go out and drive illegally and don't cause problems and don't get caught. How many more people do they think are going to start using cannabis after it's legal? We're already there, folks.
Well, when you've got 3 states and soon to be 4, thanks to the Kentucky governor telling their Senate to go fly a kite because they wouldn't make a decision, we're going to be surrounded. So everybody who lives on the border is going to simply be able to cross the border and get whatever they need and come right back over. So, like I said, that may be one of the reasons things are starting to change downtown, is because after what what Governor of Kentucky did, they're probably thinking, well, damn, now what do we do? Now we have to make a decision because we're going to look like, the island that we are here in Indiana. So anyway, so that's, yeah, you're right. You're right. There's plenty of people every day out there, and nobody's getting pulled over and hauled into jail. So yeah, that's not the question they should be asking, but it's another shiny object that they throw up so that people can be distracted from the real questions.
Indiana, you are surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Denise.
Well, just like you said, with Kentucky, hopefully with more of our legislatures in Indy, which is closer to Kentucky, they'll see, like I'm up north, so I see all the people that go to Michigan. Like I have friends and family and everything. They'll go up there every day, every couple of days, every weekend. I mean, it's not a problem. So hopefully they see that. But talking about the safety aspect of, you even said, obviously cannabis is safer than alcohol. And I kind of want to take it one further than Neil. What do you think, or how can we protect the rights of workers that medicate with cannabis but get drug tested?
That's a real good one, because I've been giving that a lot of thought over the last few months. The simple answer is it has to be listed as something that they can't test for it. I mean, let's put it this way. It's going to be no different. It would be the same as me telling somebody that after they've had a fun weekend with their friends and they've been on the lake or doing something like that and spent the whole weekend drinking beer, they're going to come back and get a test immediately on Monday morning. They're probably going to come up positive for alcohol, even if it's just a little bit. So it seems to me that every business is going to have to decide for themselves. So the bigger the business, the bigger the corporations, like one I work for, will clearly probably hedge their bet and say, look, we're not going to test for this anymore. I would be curious, and thank you for bringing that up, and I've never asked this question, what they do in the legal states. Is the company holding the employee responsible, especially if they either have a medical card or knowing that it's legal? Does the company still say, not while you're working for us? Because the way jobs are going these days, that could cause somebody to quit and go someplace else because they're thinking, hey, you're letting my buddy over here drink a 12-pack on the weekend, and I can't have cannabis. That's not fair because I don't drink, I don't like alcohol. I think I should have the same benefit. So let's hope that we don't have to make that a bigger deal than it is, and that most large American corporations will simply say no more testing. We're not going to worry about that, at least as far as cannabis is concerned.
Greg, would you be
Unfortunately,
No, we got some technical difficulty too, I think.
Sorry, I was just going to say my brother lives in California and he works for the Teamsters Union and they have zero tolerance.
It's amazing to me. I mean, it doesn't actually seem to make much sense to me, as the unions seem to be getting a little bit stronger and they're making a big push to help people. It would seem that would be against their better judgment to say, hey, okay, if marijuana is but they don't have a zero tolerance for alcohol, I imagine, or they don't have a zero tolerance for smoking, or they don't have a zero tolerance for, so in my mind, that's just once again somebody up the food chain who's who's probably just out of touch, who's still making decisions that don't make sense.
Well, and
And
I think a lot of it is we don't have the testing. Like we can't tell, we can't tell if you smoked it an hour ago or 6 days ago. We're just not that technical yet.
Right.
And that I'd love to see in Indiana.
Right. Statistically, I thought I read once that it's actually stays in your system for days, and it's positive.
Sometimes months.
Yeah. So it can't be done unless it's done at some sort of, unless it finally becomes federally legal and they have the backing of the FDA or something to go out and actually make a test that's going to show something that's real, and really in the area of inhibiting your ability to do whatever your job is. Then that's where the difference is going to be. I think it's what it's going to boil down to. So, but yes, Denise, I agree.
Yeah.
With you.
I agree that probably it is federal. Yeah. Go ahead, Neil.
There is a computer test that can be done to test impairment. According to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, 72% of all accidents are caused by workers being sick or fatigued. And the vast majority of substance abuse that causes injury at the workplace is alcohol. Cannabis factors into about, I think it was like 1.5% of the total. But the impairment test wouldn't tell you why you're impaired. It would just tell you that you are not operating up to quality and safety on machine, equipment, vehicle, whatever.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we're kind of forgetting about is that like you used to be told when you were young, you're an adult. You need to make good decisions. So if there's a problem, the problem of that small percentage of people isn't going to go away, whether it's alcohol or whatever it is. If you can't not use cannabis while you're working, if you have to do it at lunch or whatever the case may be, but if it's a pain relief situation, if it's something that's medically necessary, then yeah, I mean, it's you're right. I mean, this is what I like to call a high class headache. These kind of decisions need to be made after the fact. We got to get over the hump and say, okay, we're going to legalize this now. But these are the kinds of things that a committee would start looking into, a committee that needs to be appointed by the state legislator to start looking at these numbers and this information so that we can come back and be ready when it's ready to sign. When the governor signs it off, we're ready to say this is how dispensaries are going to work. This is how the numbers are going to work. This is all the things we need to know based on all the information we've gathered from the other states. There's plenty of it out there, but we need to start with that, something that simple.
I agree, Greg. Shelley?
I'm going to skip a question here and go to how should, when the right people do come and the stars align, and cannabis becomes either medicine or adult use in Indiana, how should the taxes be allocated?
Wow, that's a $1 million question. And once again, I've not researched. I guess I could use some of the wonderful stories I've heard from Colorado and some of the things they're doing out there. I think that, and this is me and my number one plank on my platform, the bulk of this money needs to go to education. This state is so far behind. Currently, worst paid teachers in the country. Currently, some of the worst school systems as far as buildings that are in dire need. But I think that by giving children free books, by making kindergarten available to everybody, all of these things that start the process of giving us and getting teachers the money and the respect they deserve, that builds an entire base of people that want to stay in the state, they want to work in the state, and it makes a big difference. So that would be my number one goal, is that the education system would get a large bulk of that money. Then I flip the script, and I would also want to see a large bulk of it go to mental health care. I think that there's an enormous amount of money that's not being used, and an enormous amount of people who need our help, and they don't get it because there's no system in place currently. And many people don't even realize that, but there really isn't a system in place to help people when they're down on their luck and things are looking bad, whether it's a safe place to sleep or a safe place to eat, and some place where they can go and talk to somebody and not feel that they're being subjugated to a million questions. So you've got education, which builds strong young people who end up becoming strong citizens, who end up getting great jobs that stay in Indiana. And then you in turn have those same people turning around and helping people that need the help they need, whether it's homeless shelters or anything along that line, things that right now Indiana is lacking. And that would be the top two things I would think of if I was king and I was given the opportunity to write the bill and say, this is where the bulk of the money is going to go. And then, of course, I'm sure we could find other sources, small organizations, environmental organizations, which I'm big on, would also jump right into my brain as far as areas that we could help with parks and trails and things along that line to make everybody happy and healthy.
That sounds pretty good to me. How do you feel? Should our students that are in junior high, high school, should they still be tested for THC if they participate in the sports and such?
Well, I think that's, for me, that's almost a gray area, because I think what everybody's talking about doing with this product is trying to make it just like alcohol and cigarettes and everything else. They're trying to make it more of an adult type of thing. I think that unfortunately, if you're going to start talking about high school sports, which are extracurricular, and the rules are different in a lot of cases, I would have to lean towards whatever if the school system itself, unless the state comes out and we ever get an actual education secretary who's elected as opposed to appointed, if we can go back to that, and then they come up with a plan to say, do we test junior high kids? I think they're being tested if they have to be tested for everything, I guess that's going to be one of them. And if it's going to be against the law to even own it if you're under 18, then I think that's pretty straightforward. I don't think I'd fight that. That would be a fight I wouldn't want to fight. I would just say, if that's what the school system decides, if that's what the parents decide, if that's what the education system decides, then I say fine. That's going to be okay with me. And I don't see a point of dying on that hill. It wouldn't be worth it. Not a chance.
I know when my daughter started driving to school, even though the driving was not necessarily an extracurricular activity, she became subject to drug tests because she was parking her car on high school property. I think, and I don't really know how, I hadn't given it much thought until you just answered, but isn't that kind of a double message to our youth that we're funding your education from products that contain THC, but yet at the same time, we're going to penalize for using said product?
That's a very interesting way of looking at it. And it's been a while since I've been to high school. But I can tell you, I walked into many a high school day and I would have never passed a test. Good thing I didn't have that back in my days. But that's really an interesting question. I don't know it. Once again, I think that it's about, as an adult, we tell ourselves to make good choices. We also want to tell our kids to make good choices. I didn't know they were I honestly didn't know they were testing kids just for parking a car. That does seem a little extreme to me. I really don't understand how that's even, I don't know. Searching lockers is one thing, but accusing a child of being under the influence just because they park their car in the parking lot, I think that might be a whole different animal for me. So
right, yeah, and I do know that the canines will go out in the parking lot and walk around the cars and such, which, I mean, I understand, but at the same time, it's, if we're going to be funding the schools with that money,
yeah,
I don't know that it should be looked at in that way.
My wife just chimed in behind me and said they were doing that design as well too. I wonder if they sniff out weapons too. Wouldn't that be great? But no,
Yeah.
they don't do that. They sniff out that. And the alcohol. She's back, and now she's chiming in back here. Yeah, they don't sniff out now they sniff out the alcohol. So yes, Shelley, I feel your pain. I think that is such an unusual situation, and once again, this may have more to do with the world we live in. I think they're drawing conclusions based on one problem, which is, which we'll get off the subject, but it's about, all the horrible things that have been happening in schools and Sandy Hook and all these places. And they're using that as an excuse to go out and search cars for stuff that has nothing to do with the problem that's scaring them the most. So as a good parent, it's a discussion you want to have with your kids too. Is like, if they're gonna ask you to be tested, don't bother. Just wait till the weekends or wait till the evenings. Don't. Yeah, and I agree. It does sound like a double standard, but it's something that if the school's going to be like that, you just almost have to tell them, look, just abstain before class and wait till the evenings. And if that cool about it, like I would be, I just tell them, look, don't get busted in the parking lot. That's just gonna hammer your day. That's not what you want.
On a related topic, what's your position on firearms regulations and people with who also maybe have an Indiana medical cannabis card, or even just having recreational cannabis? Right now, if you have a firearm and cannabis, you're going to jail.
Well, once again, that's pretty hysterical considering our legislature just did away with the gun license, and when you have the head of the state police telling these guys that they're a bunch of dummies because they're a super majority and they're not representing the people anymore, and they can't get them out of there. I think that once again we're combining two things that have nothing to do with each other. And it seems amazing to me, and this is also something I've not heard before, Neil, that as gun crazy as this country is, that somehow owning a gun is perfectly fine, loaded or unloaded in some cases, in your car, on your person, walking around like Dirty Harry. But the minute you put some marijuana in your pocket, now you're a crazed criminal. Holy smokes.
That's what that says.
That's the most insane. That isn't the most insane thing I've ever heard, but I'll be real honest. That is quite the perplexing transposition of ideologies. I don't get that at all. But the obvious answer is that one's an apple, the other's an orange, and they don't have anything to do with each other. My position on guns, if you want to get into that, that's a whole nother hour we could spend. But I'm not going to, the Second Amendment's there, and there's nothing that we're going to be able to do about it. But what the legislature did this year to the state police and the police in general was a complete disservice, and it defunded them too, because that money was paying for training lessons and bullets and things that these local police departments use, and they want to know where their money's coming from now. And they were told point blank, go to your town council, get more money, and because this is the way the bill's written, and that's just the way it's going to be. So, yep.
But they'll make more marijuana arrests and get fines and fees and civil asset forfeiture, things they can sell on the open market, and it's completely legal. That's another aspect. What would you do? Excuse me, I have a kitty that
See
wants
that.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, we like cats and dogs around here. But we have, the firearms issue is an issue. You shouldn't be, you're not automatically going to jail if you have a bottle of whiskey and a shotgun. And that might be the one you might want to think about putting behind.
I'll just go to a bonfire somewhere. I don't know. That's probably it's not unusual. So no, you're right.
37 states have opted out of federal marijuana prohibition now. That's by legalizing cannabis for medical and or personal adult use. As a result, there are now more than 428,059 people working in state-regulated cannabis businesses across the U.S. Due to the conflict between state and federal cannabis laws, those workers are under constant threat of federal prosecution and a lack of access to banking services to put their safety and the safety of others at risk. What would you do on a state level to try to make sure that legal cannabis businesses, we have them now, CBD, that they can access banking?
Well, as somebody who ran a couple of different businesses, the concept of having a business but not being able to use a bank is completely ridiculous. I would try to research what other states have done or are trying to do, and try to make sure that the people that run these dispensaries hopefully don't have to deal strictly in cash, because that's a fairly scary option, which requires security and all kinds of other things that just goes against the bottom line. Not to mention the opportunity to be robbed on a regular basis. Transporting that much cash can be dangerous too, although most people who run small businesses go to the bank every day and drop it off. But hey, wait a minute, you can't go to the bank. Where am I supposed to go? So I would hopefully find a way and follow the lead of some of the other states that are looking at that same issue. But the bottom line on that is, you obviously have to decriminalize this, or you have to at least not make it a Schedule I narcotic on a federal level. If they can just do that, I think that a lot of the other policy problems that we're having would disappear, especially the banking one. I know you probably read the story about the situation where there was money being moved across the country, and there was a whole host of police officers who knew about it, and they took the money, they held it for years, and then these guys just got their $1 million back that was confiscated. It was more or less like an Old West robbery, because
that was all it was.
Yeah, and they knew they could do it because that's the way these laws are written, that they can confiscate cars and money and anything they find in an illegal transaction. So that's the kind of thing that would be almost the key point of how this law is, how the whole rule is wrong. If you want more of this to happen, you want people to get hurt, you want people to die, you want people to continue robbing each other over something that's a legal job that people are doing legally, we have to find a way to fix that problem. And that would be, in my mind, one of the primary things that a committee would be looking at, to try to determine what Indiana can do different. Perhaps we become the first state to make it legal to use a particular type of credit union or bank, as long as the bank is willing to do the transaction. I think we should leave it to the banks. I don't think it should be some decision that a federal government or a state government should make. I think it's a business transaction.
You're 100% correct. We're at the end of the show. Anything else you'd like to say about the issue?
Well, for me, like I said, growing up as a young man, and I grew up with a bunch of wonderful people on the northwest side of Indianapolis in a little neighborhood. We all are still extremely close friends. There's dozens of us. I'm told it's very unusual to grow up and still be friends with the same people for 30 or 40 years. And a lot of it centers around cannabis. We were safe together. We stayed together. We never got in much trouble. I didn't say any trouble. And a lot of times we just stayed at somebody's house, or we stayed at an area we called the Grove. And I think it was a big part of what kept us out of jail and out of vehicles, and all of us staying alive. And I say that with no qualms whatsoever. And now, as I got older, the product is something that we need for all the people, for the opioid crisis, for the vets that are in trouble, for people like my wife that's on expensive medications that could probably be replaced. All of these things can be resolved, not to mention the hemp that the farmers could be growing 2 and 3 times a year. I just read a wonderful article about hempcrete, actual blocks that they're making out of hemp, like concrete, that are going to be a building material, which will save millions of dollars. And there's just so many other things. So for me, it's a no-brainer. And if once I'm elected and I get downtown and I help JD, we will push very hard to get something through committee to start this ball rolling, to benefit all of the people in Indiana, not just District 41, which is Boone and Clinton counties and Tippecanoe counties.
Greg, I thank you very, very much for joining us this evening. And that's it for another edition of Cannabis Conversations with the Candidates. We're brought to you by Hometown CBD in Plainfield. And if you're registered to vote, please do so. It's your patriotic duty. On behalf of Denise and Shelley and all of Indiana Normal, we bid you a good evening.